I'm Dr. Julie Pham, founder of Curiosity Based. We help people practice curiosity in the world, starting in the workplace, because that is where we spend most of our waking hours. Curiosity as a practice boils down to self-awareness, relationship building, and clear communication. So join us as we interview leaders to see how they use curiosity at work.
Yay.
Hi. Well, I am super excited to get to chat with my dear friend, Elizabeth Scallon, who is a long time leader in the tech world in higher ed, in startups, in industry, and also helping on the funding side as well. Welcome, Elizabeth, to Curiosity at Work podcast.
Hey, thank you so much, Julie, for having me. I'm really honored to be here today.
Yes, and I am super excited for our audience to get to hear from your insights because we don't often get to talk to leaders in tech about curiosity and about the people side of the business. So, Elizabeth, you've done so many different things. Could you just share with our listeners your background?
Yeah. So it really, if you boil it all down, it's taking ideas and helping them to come to life and have impact. So I've done that in the university setting at University of Washington, helping to take those ideas that are on campus and bring them out into the world by creating startups. I've also worked at places like WeWork, where we've been helping startups in the community across the world get connected both to talent, to customers and investors, and help them scale. I've worked at Amazon in their corporate venture arm, helping to support the founders that we invest in at Amazon. And then also here, I work at HP right now, helping internal founders create those ideas and bring them out to the market. And in the meantime, I also created a nonprofit called Find Ventures, where I supported entrepreneurs from underrepresented backgrounds with early stage funding so that they could do those experiments and go from an idea into having impact and traction to then get follow-on funding and have continuous impact.
So many different angles in the tech startup world, and I know how passionate you are about working directly with the founders as well. So, I know your title is Director of Corporate Incubation. What does that mean, and what is that? Because I know it's a global role, right? Could you kind of talk about what that means and the nature of how people work in that space?
Yeah, so it is by nature a global role because we have projects all over the world. HP is a international company. We have my teammates are in India, Spain, all throughout the U.S., etc. And what we're doing is helping to be that support for the innovation engine at HP. And so, new concepts, new ideas, new businesses that HP should be in, we can help incubate them. And by that means that we have a rigorous process to validate both the customer, the problem, and the solution to see this is actually worthwhile for us to pursue. Maybe it's a worthwhile endeavor for somebody else to pursue, or for a smaller team. But for us, it's like, how can we help bring those really big ideas to market that are going to influence and impact our customers in those positive ways? And so our team has that ability to look across the world and across all the different business units at HP to see where we can have the highest impact.
Oh, and so when you say customers, you mean HP customers, or do you mean internal HP units?
Well, both. But really, when we're doing those validations for our business ideas, we of course want to, have HP be our first pilot customer for anything that we do. It's always good to test out that those new systems in a friendly environment. And get that feedback. So then when we do talk to our external customers, we then show up better to the market, right? We've already, understood some of the nuances and the different abilities that we need to build, bring all of that in. And so when we have that next level conversation with our external customers, we just show up more prepared, articulate, concise of how we can help them, how we can't, and what are those areas of how we can integrate and bring value to them.
And so from what I understand, your team is about 10 or so people remote. Is that?
Yeah, exactly. So, our leadership is in Barcelona, Spain. And so we, every few months, will convene the team and meet there and have, face-to-face workshops and connections. But our day to day is 100% remote.
And you connect and collaborate with so many different parts of HP, though. Even though your team is remote and it's 10, you actually just 10 people, you actually talk with a lot of different partners within HP.
Oh yeah, I mean all over. And so sometimes, we'll have workshops and I'll show up and I'll fly, to different locations so that we can have different workshops, connections, collaborations. But yeah, a lot of it is via virtual with folks all over the world. So for me being on the West Coast, a lot of my days start super early, and then maybe I'll have some late night meetings depending on what project I'm working on and what's going on. So it's kind of fun that we get to engage, all over the world with great minds. And then with that, comes that ability for the virtual environment to be able to meet with them at convenient times for the different time zones.
So really interested to hear how you foster curiosity at work in such a diverse setting, and not just speaking about your experience at HP, any of your experiences, whether working in industry or in higher ed or with your nonprofit. So let's get into talking about how we practice curiosity at work. And at Curiosity Base, we think of curiosity as a practice that has these three elements of self-awareness, relationship building, and clear communication. So I'm going to ask you for your specific examples and stories that are related to each of those areas, especially because people don't get to know that much about how does curiosity work in the tech world. So Elizabeth, for the first one, what's an example of fostering self-awareness at work?
Yeah, so for self awareness, I think that one of the ways that big corporations always like to evaluate employees is through performance reviews. And so one of the things that I do is I always ask for non-anonymous feedback up front during that time, and I also give it because I think during those times it's good to hear people's honest answers of you, of what they think, what you need to work on, and having people be able to feel safe with you to be able to deliver that to you. I think is important. And I also think that performance reviews can be just more beneficial when we actually open up that conversation of like, hey, I think it would be more important if you did this, or hey, when you're doing that, I don't connect in the same ways. What is your intent? And again, you're not going in to try to tear down each other. It's like, how do we actually uplift each other, make us the best possible humans we can be? And so really walking into those conversations with openness. And so, one of the feedback that I got recently, which I thought was really helpful, was that sometimes I'm too much of a visionary, too much of a abstract thinker. It's sometimes I come off also too markety and not bringing in enough concrete examples to help this one individual understand what I'm trying to say from a practical, like end user story, perspective. I thought that was really helpful because sometimes I do. I'm so excited about our technology. I'm so excited about what the vision is that I'll stop. I'll forget to stop and then take it down. It's like, oh, well, this actually means instead of you doing A, you're going to do B. And by doing B, the impacts are X, Y, and Z. And then when you do the next thing, you actually maybe, and so one of those impacts could be I save you time. There's less steps. So I save you time and there's, or maybe it's cheaper. Maybe you have just, there's a delightful experience that happens from something, right? So you show that as you walk them through your alternative from what is happening today, the status quo, that, where are the joy moments? Where's the points that, gets empowered, or what are you trying to, save, right? Time, money, something else. And so it's like, we can show that where it is, right? And so again, like I'm very much high level. I want to talk about 5-year vision from now, but sometimes it's so it was really good feedback to saying, okay, am I explaining this in a way that because if this is just one audience member, this might be other audience members the story to. And so it's very applicable for me to also just step back and saying, okay, am I talking about today and what's going to change today and how that user journey will be, impacted by this innovation. And so for me, it was really helpful feedback. Again, I wasn't mad or upset. I was very thankful to have this feedback so that, again, I could, step back and then apply it to my other endeavors. The other feedback that I got recently that I thought was really helpful is, you don't ever have to overpromise something, so you want to be real about what the expectations are of what you can deliver, but you don't ever have to stretch it so much that that it's so good. Sometimes you can win people on, meeting the bare minimum and hitting that. And so instead of going too far over, it's like, oh, not only can I meet that and beat it by a little bit, I can really beat it by X. And so sometimes I got feedback of surprise them with that. Because you want to set yourself up for more wiggle room too. And so I thought back that
delight them versus disappoint them, right?
yeah, exactly.
So,
'Cause even
and
if
managing the
yeah,
expectations.
managing the expectations up front, not setting out such ambitious goals, but have them still in your head and in your heart of what you're going to do. But it's okay to let people know along the way that you're going to meet status quo plus. But then again, you can add on the big win later. And so then you can have that be the fun surprise. And so I also thought that was very great feedback for me.
Elizabeth, I appreciate how you shared recent examples. Sometimes when talking to leaders, it's like, oh yes, way back when I got this feedback. And it's so clear that you really appreciated the feedback, which I bet that the people, your enthusiasm for it also made it safer. Oh, I can continue to give Elizabeth feedback too. And so this is for any leaders of just when you get that feedback, be enthusiastic. And also, I mean, and reacting with curiosity to try to learn what that feedback means. And I totally agree with you about being transparent with the feedback. I'm not a fan of those 360 anonymous reviews because then we just spend all this time wondering who said what about us. So
And then you can never go and follow back up with questions of like, well, hey, and also I don't feel comfortable ever giving anonymous feedback because I'm like, if I'm going to tell you something and I think there's something that you could really work on so that you could get to that next level, I want to help and coach you and be that support system for you and that accountability partner. So I think a lot of times, you get that feedback, you're like, great, I don't know what to do with it. It was anonymized. How can I, circle back with that person and then saying, hey, am I doing it? Have you seen that in a meeting recently? Hey, do you think I accomplished that? And so, you know, if you go into those reviews thinking, hey, I want to be the best that I possibly can be, and I want you to be the best possibly you can be, then I think you create an environment where then you have those accountability partners throughout the year of like, hey, was I too abstract or like did I bring it down on the practical level enough? And hey, I set expectations. Did you think that I did it in the right manner? Do you think I was being too aggressive with those goals? Please give me some feedback there. And then people are like, yeah, I think you did that well here, or no, I think you're still working on it. I think maybe do this or that, and those fine tunings just make you so much better for the throughout the year.
mhm. So let's go on to the second element of practicing curiosity, which is relationship building. How do you go about fostering relationship building, especially when you're all remote and in so many different time zones?
Yeah, so I think one of the ones, for me, is that I also work with different technologists and innovators and founders. And then I also work with government agencies and investors and customers. And so I constantly have to bridge the two different sets of words, different expectations, what they're looking for, what their needs are. And it's kind of helpful because my undergrad is in biochemistry and then my graduate degree is in business. And so I understand the lingo and the language that people use, and then being able to translate that not only between the innovator and myself or the investor and myself, but really even between the two of them. And so there are great methods like the pitch deck and other tools that in the startup world we use. And so, what's helpful is creating those frameworks for folks to use, as well as creating the opportunity of like, okay, right now we're going to time bound. How long are you going to talk about the technology? Now we're going to go and talk about, the impact of this on the customer, the benefits, and then really being able to understand, okay, this is what you're looking for, and this is, who I think would be best to describe that. But what I also like to do is make sure that both parties are in the same meeting so that they can also hear the different questions that people ask. Investors have what is called like a scorecard method to evaluate early stage companies, and they ask questions about the team, the experience. They ask questions about the market and the market opportunity. Is it going to grow? They ask questions about the competitors and who's there. They ask questions about your ideal customer profiles and why do you think it's them, and of course they ask about the problem and the solution and things like that. But it's helpful for other folks like early founders or first time founders or innovators to hear those kind of questions. Like, I didn't know that they would ask me about my competitors or about the market size. Like, of course, there's a big market. It's like, well, you should have a number for that. And you should have an understanding of like, what's the amount of customers that you think that you can attract in the next couple of years. And how does that grow your market, and what market are you going after first? And having people understand what the priorities are for each group so that they can then move forward with productive connections, right? If that's like a connection for trying out a new technology, or that's a connection of getting investment dollars, or if that's a connection of just letting your leadership allow you to continue on with your project. You have to be able to understand what matters to those stakeholders and those decision makers so that you can then bridge your message and your storytelling to them so that they can then be persuaded to take the action that you're looking for them to take.
So you're really playing this bridging role.
Yeah.
You're actively playing the bridging role. And that's where, and bringing these people together who wouldn't normally have those relationships.
Yeah, I mean, it's when you get really technical, you forget sometimes that people don't understand your world. And so I feel like a lot of times we get, that especially with researchers and innovators, they're so curious and so devoted to this problem set or this area of exploration that they completely forget that other people have never even heard of the initial high concept. And so, you have to sometimes bring people in at the different layers so that folks understand, oh, okay, you're talking about this. And then in that, you're talking about this aspect. And then in this, you're talking about this aspect. And then in here, you're talking about that aspect. And so it's good to help be that bridge and to get both people onboarded.
I have been in those rooms where it's just whoosh, those ideas are right over me. Because even though I worked in the tech industry for 9 years, there's still times of, oh, whoosh. So this is actually, because in this bridge building, there's also a bit of translation, which I think gets us to the third element of practicing curiosity: clear communication. How do you help ensure that? What are examples of fostering clear communication at work?
So, yeah, I think that when we're talking through and bridging this, right, we have to get rid of all the jargon, first and foremost. You have to have some level setting of, hey, we're going to talk about something. We need to all have the same foundational knowledge. And so when you're setting up these meetings, sometimes you may have sections of that meeting that may bore your technologist or certain people. But that's okay because you want to get everyone on the same page. One of the things that Amazon did, I look back on now and I understand why they do this, is that there's a 6-page document that sometimes they make you write, called these narrative documents. And what I realized to appreciate afterwards, after I left, is that these 6-page documents are just a way to level set everyone in the meeting on the background, the trends, what you're trying to do and achieve and why you're trying to do that. Why do you think you have, the right information for that? But it gives a foundation on, making sure that everyone has the same level of information. And that's something that I think a lot of people forget, is that we all come from different backgrounds. We all come from different perspectives. We're reading different news stories. And so we may not understand in the same way that other people do what a certain topic is. And so for one topic in particular, the Continuum Educational College at UW was hosting legislators last summer. And I was invited to join that discussion because we were talking about AI and what is the legislation at Washington state level need to be thinking about workforce development with regards to AI. And so, we gave a presentation overall on what's the foundation of AI and what did these terms mean, and how are they being applied. And then we talked about, even in my class, how I encourage people to use AI. And I have a couple different rules of how people can do it. They have to tell me that they're doing it. They have to tell me the prompts. They have to tell me how they edit it. And they're still responsible for every work product that they turn in. And so, we go through that. But how, even in something that's so rapidly approaching us and is coming to impact us, it was good to just make sure that, hey, before that meeting started, let's make sure we're all talking about the same terms and we all mean the same thing by these terms, because some of these terms can mean lots of different things in different contexts. So, hey, this is how we're going to define them for this context. This is our expectations. This is, the background that you need. And this is what we're going to be discussing today. And so being very clear about that actually also really alleviates any of the stress around, well, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, how was I supposed to know something before I showed up to this meeting? What was the background? And there's a lot of anxiety there. And so if you take that part out and say, hey, I'm just going to make sure that whatever you need for this meeting is here at your disposal. And then if you don't know anything, it's okay to raise your hand and say, I don't understand what that term means. And so I also practice that when I come to terms or I hear things for the first time that I don't understand. I'll make sure to, ask that question like, hey, can you explain that? What do you mean by that? And then I also, if I look around and see, hey, I don't know if everyone's fully understanding that, I'll step back and either I will try to explain what that, concept is, or I'll, again, ask the speaker to say, hey, do you mind pausing and explaining that in more depth? Because I think a lot of times it's not malicious, or all the times it's not maliciously at all. It's just that we're so focused on being experts in our field, we'll forget to pause and bring everyone back up to speed on what, of like, what's that discussion here? Like, where are we? And then just letting everyone have that background. And again, we can't be experts at everything. And so it's nice to be able to have that connection with someone, and, feel comfortable and safe enough to say, I don't know. Do you mind me? And that is really hard for leaders to do. So sometimes it's also good if you see in your leadership, maybe they're not fully understanding. It's always just good to pause and then reiterate, what that concept is, to make sure that everyone's following along with you. Because you don't want to get stakeholders, off-boarded just because they got lost in the complexity of something.
And I think it's such a good point to make that part of the beginning of it. That way there's not, oh, I should have prepared. Just, no, we're all going to do it. We're all going to do it together. Because I know in this work, you work with such diverse stakeholders. The way a nonprofit and government sees equity is going to be really different from a funder, right? The word equity has two different definitions. And yet, if you don't clear that up in the beginning, you could have total confusion. So I appreciate it's about setting up the time. And I heard also through that Amazon, the writing process, people become much better writers too. The employees become much better writers. Was that the case for you? Did you feel like you became a better writer after?
Yeah, I did. Well, it's also interesting too, because you don't realize that you are becoming a better writer as you are. And so I left there thinking, I still have a long ways to go, because you would read people's papers that when you were there that had maybe 10, 15 years, and you're just like, this is beautiful. You're so, you're describing it in such concise language. It's so easy to follow you. You're not allowed to have any jargon in those papers too. And so to read someone who's been there for a while, it's really actually pleasurable, if that makes sense, because it's just like, it's easy for your brain to like go along the journey of what they're trying to say. You don't have to stop and pause and be like, what do they mean by that? Okay, where do they mean this? Because it's just clearly outlined what their point is and what their perspective is. But I haven't written in that fashion for the last 2 years. And so I don't know, I'm still at that level that I was. But yeah, I did definitely increase from my first paper where my boss was like, what is this to you? I mean, my last one was like, okay, this makes sense. And this is great. And, very clear. So it was a fun journey to be on.
It's so nice to be able to know that we can be building skills, not just contributing our skills. Elizabeth, can you share how you define curiosity and how do you foster curiosity, especially in the tech world?
So yeah, so for me, I really look at that. How do I just stay current with all the latest technology trends? Technology and human innovation is always, is always present, right? And so what I like to do is be able to just stay and consume as much information as possible about what are people doing right now? What do they care about? What are they thinking about? And what are they building? So for me, I always, search different articles and newspapers and different accounts and social media accounts to be able to just sort of stay on top of what are the latest trends. What are people investing in? Even like with VCs and startups, like what are people building? What do they just get funding for? What are big, VCs? They'll make these reports of like, hey, we're investing in X, Y, or Z thesis. We think this is, the next big trend. And so we're really excited about it. And usually they also demonstrate some of their investments that they've been doing on top of that. So for me, I like to kind of step back and be like, what's the landscape? What are people thinking about? What are people doing? And then again, understand, well, how does that impact then these other things that have already existed? Or what will that future entail? And so also just being excited about, okay, like if that, then what? Right. And so like one of the trends that I've been looking at a lot is like, well, yes, AI is really important. It's going to impact and automate and make our life easier. And, we can do better diagnostic for diseases, et cetera. Right. There's so many cool possibilities that happen. However, AI sits in data centers and GPU chips and all of this and all of those, data centers you require a lot of energy. They require a lot of water, and so it's also like, well, what's the sustainability aspect? And then, well, how do we make it more sustainable so that we, don't have AI, hurting our world by also helping our world, right? And so, how do we create these systems that actually are sustainable from end to end, and so that we can have new technology trends that impact positively our community.
Mm. So that there sounds like there's a lot of I think that would be the hardest thing for me is that when I was working tech, all of the different trends to stay on top of. What about, I mean, we talked about curiosity being practiced, which means sometimes it's hard to practice. When have you found it difficult to practice curiosity in the workplace?
Yeah, well, personal story is that earlier this year I had an idea for a new business, and I had the idea, and I had some early customer research, and had an early prototype, and so I wanted to go out and go get some customer validation, of course, under NDA and top secret and all of that, but get some early customer feedback on, is this the problem actually worth solving? Is this a solution that would even work, etc. Right, and just really validate what I was doing or invalidate it altogether. And what's interesting is that a couple of folks got nervous. Like, hold on, why are you being curious about this? And why are you trying to go get customer input? Because they, didn't want us to tip our hand too much and let folks know what we're doing, or come unprepared, right? Like, well, you don't have your solution all figured out. And so you don't want to go to these customers too early, because they won't appreciate, the work that you've done and the work that still needs to be done. It's too early for them. They want to see something more hardened, more commercialized product. And so they got really nervous. They thought that the customer couldn't handle an early stage conversation. And again, it was interesting for me because I had to go get layers of approval to still be able to do this, even though there was, some folks that were as nervous about it. And, to me, it was really about, if you respect the conversation and respect how you're going to have the conversation, curiosity, folks love to be brought in early. No one ever gets mad for being brought in too early to a conversation. I've only heard people getting mad when they brought in too late.
That's so true.
Yeah.
That is so true.
And so when you wait too long to bring someone into the conversation, that's when they get upset. It's like, why do you ask for my input earlier? Blah, blah, blah. So I always like to bring in my customers really early on so that I can understand if what I'm doing even matters to them. I think this is an urgent and necessary problem to solve. Is that true? Are you seeing that? Is that what's happening? And for my personal example, half the people hated my idea. Great. It was like, okay, these are definitely not my customers. Those are not ever going to be my ideal customer profile. Right. But then I got this other half that absolutely loved it and wanted to know more. I wanted to be connected in and wanted to be brought along in the process so that maybe one day they'll implement it. They didn't make any promises to me, so it wasn't, any guarantees. But what it was wonderful to say, they're still open to conversations and as I'm progressing. And so I thought that was really cool. So even though, these leaders were nervous, they, turned around to say, hey, what you did was valuable. That was good insights. That was really helpful to know. But it was new for them. It was a new behavior. And so then new behaviors create anxiety and create worry. But I think it's all about how do you set up those conversations in a way where, again, you protect the company, you have NDAs, these are with trusted partners, customers, and you can have some of those early conversations in a safe space, right? And so I think that getting early feedback, and if everyone hated my idea, how wonderful to find out up front, so that you know that you don't have to waste your time on it. New ideas take a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of dedication. And if you don't have to work on an idea, that's really nice. You can then work on something else that actually is useful. And so I like to free up my own space by then identifying if something is, if it's important or not to the customer.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is that fear of being exposed or looking bad, and then also wasting people's time when it's not ready, that can actually get in the way of preventing practicing curiosity. And yeah, you can save so much more time later on if you find out what it is early. And I appreciate so much what you said. People never complain about being told too early. They complain about being told late.
Yeah, exactly. It's a hard one to learn, but I think if you learn that, you're like, okay, yes, I'd rather bring you in early and have you see some rough edges than if you aren't a part of it. Because then there's also co-ownership, and they get excited, right? They feel like they're part of that process, and they want to evangelize it even more for you, right? I don't know.
What was that quote from Reid Hoffman? If you're not embarrassed by your first draft, then you launched too early, or you launched too late, or something like that. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think that's just so true in the startup world, right? Like people really do, they don't know when to let it go and have it be launched and have people know about it. Because you want things to be perfect because your name's associated with it. Your hard work has been associated with it, but you just learn so much the second you get into a customer's hand. And that, the fastest you can do that to get those learning lessons is the most important, right? Because, what you think in your head just isn't reality. And so it's just good to get that reality as soon as possible.
Yeah, I'm always telling my team, let's think about what we're going to learn, not just what we're going to accomplish.
I
So
love
now we've got our last question, which is, what's a resource that inspires you, that inspires curiosity in you, that you'd like to turn to?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I'm a mom. I have a 7-year-old, right? And her name is Dylan. And so Dylan inspires me every day, right? And so I think one of the fun things is that there's all these new tools for kids to create with online. And so we'll go ahead and create our own movies. It's like we're watching a movie. Well, why can't we make a movie? Let's go make a movie, Mom. And then it's like, we make fun little movies, or what I did with one of the AI programs recently is that she said prompts at the beginning of a story, and then from that we were able to create this whole long story about these like mythical creatures and these far out planets and all this fun stuff. And then with AI now, you can also generate images from that. And so we created a mini book from that, and I just think it's like all of these ways that I would never have thought about AI and these same tools. I use them for completely different purposes in the business world. For a kid, it's like, well, yeah, let's talk about a unicorn flying to all these different planets and like meeting all these cool new friends. And these friends, look like X, Y, and Z, and then watching them interact. And so sometimes we'll still pick up the same story and like write a new chapter in it just for fun. And so I think there's ways that technology can be helpful in a business sense or in a professional way, but it's really nice to also use technology and these tools in just a creative, fun, for pleasure way where, why not create a book with your kid and like do fun things that you just normally might not do during the day, right? And so I think my kiddo gives me a lot of curiosity and just keeps me wondering like, oh yeah, why not? Well, why can't we do it this way? Well, why can't we do that? And so kids are great for that. And so she inspires me every day.
Seeing things through a child's eyes will definitely get you to keep practicing curiosity. Elizabeth, thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed this conversation. How do people get in touch with you if they want to reach out and learn more about what you do?
Yeah, I think the easiest way is my LinkedIn. LinkedIn.com, Elizabeth Scallon. Please connect in with me there, and would love to, keep the conversation going. So thank you so much, Julie, for having me. I love everything that you're doing. Big fan of your organization, of your book, everything that you do. So the pleasure has been all mine, just being able to chat with you today. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you, and keep practicing curiosity at work.